It is with profound regret that we announce the passing of Mrs. Marie Alvina Joan George, née Gibbs, affectionately known as V, Vina, or Viens. She was a former teacher at St. Joseph's Convent for about 30 years. She departed peacefully at her residence, Passiflora House, Grand Riviere Groselet, St. Lucia, on Wednesday, the 25th day of September, at the age of 79. Left to mourn are her husband of 55 years, Mr. Calix George, formerly a Minister of Government and Executive Director of the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, CARDI. Her children, Calvin George, Colette George Barker, Judine George Johnson, Zilta George Leslie, and Calix George Jr. Her grandchildren, Carrie and Lachlan Barker, Joel Svlana, and Julani Johnson, Darren Zaire and Zaya Leslie, Akila Didier and Azaria George. Her sisters, Rita Gibbs, Audrey Paris, and Arlene Gibbs. Her brothers, Tony Gibbs and Richard Gibbs. Her aunt, Doris Daniel and family. Her uncles, Sidney Charles and Raymond Sleeb Charles and their families. Her cousin, who was like a sister to her, Eileen Nicholas and her family, Andre, Desiree, Andrew, and Lisa Marie Nicholas. Her brother-in-law, McGriffin Theodore and his children, Allison, Nadia, and Aldrich Theodore. Her sister-in-law, Laura Gibbs. Her sons-in-law, Nigel Barker, Samuel Johnson, and Derek Leslie. Her nephews, Christopher, Nicholas, Matthew, Sundiata Christian, Adrian, and Brian Gibbs. Her nieces, Kira Paris, Renee Bellamy, Zena Gibbs Maycock, Erica and Danielle Gibbs. Her cousins, Errol Charles, Elizabeth Charles Suma, and Kenneth Montplaisir QC and their families. Her other relatives within the Gibbs, Charles Montplaisir, and Drysdale families. Her friends, Mrs. Joyce Destang, Mrs. Tekla de Turville, Mr. Francis Leonce, Miss Lawrence Laurent, Mrs. Edgetha Tobias, Miss Felicia McFarlane, Miss Angela Bryce, Mrs. Janet James, Miss Margarita Alexander, Dr. Edsel and Lucy Edmonds, Mr. I.F. and Dorothy Jeremy, Miss Nadia Joseph, Mrs. Shirley Henry of Atlanta, Monsignor Thomas Glasgow of New Orleans. Her godchildren, including Sebastian Edmonds, Christine Harvey, Sanovic Destang, and Metonia de Turville. Her adopted children, Tiana Justin and Thomas Justin, also known as Boydell, and Matthew John, better known as Lawrence. Her husband's relatives, including Mrs. Claudia Iton of the United Kingdom, and the George, John, Julian, Dossidy, Cornibut, Christopher, Bernard, Melius, and Melcher families. Her helper of 28 years, and more recently, her caretaker, Miss Augustina James, better known as Sandra. Other members of her care team, Mary and Victoria Chasney, Alina George, Dr. Shego Tobias, Althea St. Rose, and the staff of Liberty Nursing. Also left to mourn are Mr. Sidney Skinner, Miss Olympia Dede, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Cluny, and several former staff members of St. Joseph's Convent and the St. Lucia Floral Cooperative Society, members of the D'Estaing, de Turville, Drysdale, Haynes, Jeremy, Léonce, Locombe, St. Rose, Skeet, Springer, and Carrasco families both in St. Lucia and abroad, and many others too numerous to mention. The funeral mass for the late Mrs. Marie Alvina Joan George née Gibbs will commence at 2 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, 14th October, at the Church of St. Joseph the Worker, Grosley. May she rest in eternal peace.